G'day, I'm Roland Hearn, and this is A Walk in the Garden. Today I am continuing the three-part series that I started last week on trying to show how faith fits in to the walk in the garden. I am aware that there are people that watch these videos that don't share my faith perspective, and that's fine. But it is kind of helpful sometimes to know how other people see the world, and if you can get a better understanding of how that faith works for me, maybe there's an opportunity there for you to explore some ideas that you haven't thought about before. So today I'm handling that very messy subject called sin. Hold on, because I think this is going to be fun, and we're going to have a good day. I made the comment that we're going to have a good day today because I'm actually prepared to spend the whole day putting this video together. Normally, when I do one of these, I try to find a place that's no more than about a half an hour's drive away. I set up and do the video shooting, and I try to get it all done within about 2 hours. But after last week's trip on the City Cat and thinking about riding the City Cat up to the Botanical Gardens, I thought it might be fun to just kind of spend a day on the public transport of Brisbane. So I'm going to drive over to the train, get on a train, and ride it downtown to a place called Fortitude Valley, and then get on a bus and ride it down to New Farm, and then at New Farm get on the City Cat and ride up to the Botanical Gardens. And then there'll be some walking in there, obviously, and then I'll probably walk back from the gardens through the city down what we call in Australia. The city is what Americans call the downtown area, and I'll walk back through the city. So that's going to take me about 4 or 5 hours to do that whole thing together. So, but I do think it'll be a fun day and make a great space to put this difficult subject into a fun context. So let's go, shall we? So my intention with this first part of the video is to have Chang's song playing in the background. I haven't had a chance to play it in its entirety since he recorded it in an earlier episode, and I've used bits and pieces of it obviously, but never played the whole lot, and it would be really cool to hear it all again, wouldn't it? So I'm going to do that as the backdrop for this travel part, and we'll see how that goes. Timing is always going to be an issue, of course, isn't it? Anyway, let's begin, shall we? So here we are at the train station.
Never seem to go on. Feeling lost and ashamed, I'm in chains, but soon to be wrong. I had no hope to live on. Feeling lost and ashamed, I'm in chains, but soon to be wrong. Your love is for all, beyond the fall. Your love is for all. Love is for all. is to know I'm enough. What you say
Thanks, mate. Good on you, champ.
heals my pain. With your love, heals our shame. A walk with you is a walk to love. In that I know, oh, I know I'm in love. Your love
How you doing, mate?
is for all. Beyond the fall. Your love is for all. Love is for all. There is no word where there is your love, but no finding word. There is no word where there is your love, but a wall. Finding word. I know that I'm enough. It's written in your love. I know that I'm enough. It's written in your love. Even if I give up, I'm enough in your love. Even if I give up, I'm enough in your love. Your love.
Well, here I am. Finally made it. Gonna look for a nice quiet spot to talk about this, what can be a tricky subject, but that's part of the reason why I chose this setting, because of the peace and serenity. Brisbane Botanical Gardens, or City Botanical Gardens, was the first such space of this size in the city. The one that was with Chang a few weeks ago, that is a newer version, and it's quite a bit bigger than this area too, although this is not small. I'm just going to walk up here onto this little hill here, because I think this will work quite nicely for what we're trying to do. So this is where I'm going to set up right here. I've got my little tripod all ready to go, and I think this is going to work perfectly. Okay, sin. Let's get down to it. Truth is, we don't like to talk about sin very much these days. There is associated with it this idea of judgmentalism and condemnation, and the church has been guilty across the years of expressing sin in terms that are condemning and controlling and manipulative and marginalizing, and the idea that the activities of our life are connected with our eternal destiny is one that not very many people relate to these days. People are very ambivalent about whether or not there is an eternal destiny, and the idea that I have good parts and I have bad parts satisfies most people when they're thinking about their journey of life. So this religious idea of sin doesn't play out very much. And it's a problem because there actually is an idea here that is incredibly significant that plays out in this journey of the walk in the garden to try and find that place in life where we feel complete, whole, loved, valued, and that life is worth living. So, very briefly, and there's lots of intricacies in this whole discussion, as most of the things that I talk about are, but if I deal with it relatively briefly, I would say this. For the vast majority of Christians, the idea of sin is about the extent to which we are short of God's perfection. So we act out of the reality that we are not God, and as a result of the sin of Adam and Eve that entered into the human stream, all that we do out of that place is sinful. The result of sin is that we are condemned to hell. We desire to be in the place of heaven, and the remedy is confess that I have sinned, and I ask for forgiveness, and then God forgives me, and now I have an eternal destiny of life everlasting. Because I'm a human being, I will continue to sin, but now, because I've been forgiven, I have this destiny in heaven. And all of that happens as a result of the fact that Christ was crucified on the cross. And so what is understood to happen is once I ask for forgiveness, then God's focus is upon the fact that I've accepted a relationship with Christ, and that acceptance is enough to cover me in the place of my sin. John Wesley, 250 years ago, tried to express it in different terms. He said that sin is best understood as a willful transgression of the known law of God. So we've got to choose to do it, we've got to will to do it, and we've got to break the law of God. So it's not everything about us that is sinful. It is this willful choice that is, in fact, sin. He went on further to define very clearly that the law of God actually is found in the words of Jesus as to love God with all your heart and soul, mind and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So the law of God is love, and willful choices to step outside of love is what sin is. As a result, it is possible, in John Wesley's expression, to have a relationship with God through Christ that would in fact set us free from the power and the bondage of sin. This is an intriguing idea. It's an idea that is well worth thinking through. First of all, for John Wesley, the reality was that sin had much more to do with the relationship with God than the activities that resulted from that relationship, or better said, the absence of relationship. So this means that sin probably is best understood not in terms of the things that we do, but in terms of the reality of our brokenness. And regardless of whether or not we think that we have performed adequately, we are all able to recognize that we are broken. For Wesley and others, the idea of brokenness is this idea of broken relationship with God that has marred the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, the way we see our reality, and the result, I would suggest, is that pervasive sense of shame that follows us through our lives. We easily recognize we are broken, particularly if we are going through difficult times. And so then, while sin, the actions of sin, does have that component of doing things that are against love, so a person that is lying or stealing or hurting another or or uh, killing somebody or whatever, it's easy to see that in terms of acting against love. It isn't just the action, the activities. It is in fact the brokenness from which we do those things. So forgiveness is an important biblical principle. It's to recognize that I have acted out of my brokenness, and yeah, I did it willingly. I did it willfully. I could have chosen not to act in ways that are hurtful and harmful, and we all have those choices at different points. But my brokenness constantly pushed me to the place of self-defense, of self-protection, of distancing, and many times those actions, those activities express themselves in very hurtful ways. So the idea of being guilty for that and asking forgiveness, that's completely appropriate. But there is this much grander idea that is important for us to wrestle with. This idea of healing, this idea of hope that comes from a restoration of relationship. If we see, if from a Christian perspective, we see Jesus as as God the Son stepping into the world, that's a very reasonable position, because God, who is love, cannot leave us in our brokenness. He loves us. I wouldn't leave my children in their brokenness, but God, who is love, cannot abandon us in our brokenness, and so he must act towards us in a way that is embracing and healing and hope-filled. And so he draws us to himself. Well, how would he do that? How would God do that? Well, that is the Christian message. That is where Christ steps into the world. And in its purest form, it is the distinction of Christianity that it is God stepping towards us, not us trying to step towards God. It is very true that throughout the world, Christians understand their religion in terms of what they must do for God. But that isn't the way that God's represented himself to us. He has come to us in our brokenness. He has stepped into our world. And so faith, that I spoke about last week, is actually simply accepting the character of God revealed in Jesus as he stepped into this world. So his crucifixion, his death and his resurrection are all very vitally important parts of this process, because the crucifixion and his death are the result of him living in a world where he is confronting injustice, disparity, life disparity, disparities in wealth, disparities in gender, disparities in opportunity, and wherever he finds power situation, he speaks into it in a way that attends to the inequity and seeks to bring justice, because he is constantly talking about what God's kingdom is like, and God's kingdom is a place of love and grace and justice and equity, and so he is constantly speaking out those words. So of course, as he does that, he is seen as a revolutionary, and he then is taken and ultimately put to death by those who stand to lose the most if his words continue. So his death is a result of sin acting in the world, non-love acting out, bringing crucifixion, the most shame-filled death a person could die in those days, certainly as a Jew, was this idea of crucifixion. Absolutely humiliating, absolutely shame-filled when Jesus was crucified. So he identified with the totality of the human experience. He understands then what it is to be broken, what it is to be rejected, what it is to be hated, what it is to be shamed. He understands all of those things, and it is in that process of crucifixion that he ultimately and absolutely identifies with us. And so he dies. Like every human being, he dies. But then love steps into that place of death and brings life. And so he is raised again from the dead, and it is the triumph of love. And so then faith for us is simply accepting this outstretched expression of love that has reached down from heaven to us. So our sin, our brokenness, and all the things that we have done out of that brokenness actually has a solution. And it is in the love of God expressed through Jesus Christ. So again, is that, can I prove that? Not at all. But it is consistent. And as people around the world throughout thousands of years have allowed themselves to embrace that reality, the evidence of that reality has been transformed lives, incredible sense of joy, a sense of peace, a sense of comfort, a sense of love that has come along with stopping trying to work the world out in our own power, but allowing the love and the grace of God to rest upon our lives. And that is truly remarkable and truly wonderful. And when we understand sin as brokenness, we can see that the answer is love. That your journey in the garden would lead you to a place where you are not defined by your brokenness. That your identity is not in your loss, it's not in your failures, it's not in your sin, but it becomes in the love and the grace of God. That's why that's important to the journey in the garden. It's the central space of love. Till we meet next week, keep walking in your garden.
I've walked alone, never seem to go